How are the marks we make semiotic? Semiotics is not magic, nor witchcraft, nor joyless, nor time consuming. We humans are hardwired to see something in anything, be that cloud watching, staring at patterns on waiting room wallpaper, or seeking guidance through a star ascending Uranus. Sorry, schoolboy humour slips out even in semiotics. My point stands. We see a mark. Could it possibly mean this? Discuss. Welcome to Semiosis 101 Season 3's 12th episode on applying semiosis sign action to enhance your skills at visually communicating. If you've watched Semiosis 101 episodes before, then you already know I am Dave Wood. I use Semiosis 101 on YouTube, Patreon and Substack to provide a designer-centric translation of Peirce's semiosis. Why do you need Semiosis 101? Peirce's writing and terminology is very obtuse. On Semiosis 101, I translate Peirce's brilliant theory into language creators will understand and can follow. After all, we study design and illustration and not philosophy, so we need theory centered to creatives' needs. Yes, that is why you need Semiosis 101. Season 3's semiotic theme is semiotic encoding, with a focus on how audiences make interpretations. What this season's theme means to you as visual communicators is that at long last you will see what semiotic science can be, are, will be. Will build your confidence to encode semiotic sign action into your own designs or illustrations during your own ideation phase to enhance visual communication. Last week we framed the conversation around semiotic encoding of meaning as a sign, as a possibility. What I mean by this is that there is a moment when something visual is meaningfully dormant and then once perceived as a possibility of meaning bearing becomes interpretable. This means that all aspects of a creator's visual communication skill set has the possible sign action power to mean something else. Hit subscribe to this YouTube channel and I will explain. At the end of the last episode, we were on a semiotic encoding cliffhanger. The discussion on the effects of interpretation of a semiotic sign on an interpreter hung on what Scott's described as a shoogly peg, meaning a precarious situation. Interpretation of something that has been designed or illustrated either only being partly understood or more meaning being interpreted to enrich further understanding. The semiotic equivalent of a shoogly peg is whether, on the strength of the creator's representation decisions, the target audience can move from an immediate state to a dynamic state of interpretation. What this means in designer-centric language is whether the target audience can, based on their own lived experience and contextual knowledge, visually understand that one thing means something else, semiotically speaking. Creatives cannot assume. That is why applying semiosis helps. Wait a minute, I hear some of you shout at the screen. What now? We're treading old ground here, but if you draw a panda concept with the idea that just because as a creative you know what a panda looks like, everyone will see the panda representation and understand it is a drawing of a panda interpretation. You will be congratulated on how well you draw pandas. But if not everyone knows what a panda is, then they will never interpret what they see as a panda. In their lived experience and contextual knowledge, they do not have any experience of pandas. Now, substitute the concept of panda with whatever you need to visually communicate. So how can creators overcome this problem? Well, in Season 2's episodes, I explored semiotic representation and target audiences' lived experiences. What we are really exploring here, in the context of semiotic encoding of meaning and the successful interpretation of that meaning, is visually helping the audience to the intended meaning. This semiotic facilitation of a target audience's understanding of what they see to enable the audience to extract as much intended meaning as they can from the visual communication relies on what the audience is likely to interpret. The example I began to use last week was Semiosis 101's parent Scout brand's visual identity. I used this logo to demonstrate this interpretive cliffhanger of either realising the two birds were just birds or whether an audience could interpret live birds from the representation. This is the current Semiosis 101 interpretive shoogly peg, the moment between an immediate or dynamic effect on interpretation. What do I mean? Well, when you examine the Scout logo in its design, some of you out there will just see two bird shapes. Some of you will recognise they are liver birds. Some of you may not even see the shapes as birds. You will all know which you are. If you are the latter, then the semiotic encoded sign has not been perceived. The semiotic sign action has not been triggered. The semiotic sign lies dormant. But the meaning-bearing visual entity is there in plain sight, but not perceived as something. If you are the former, the effect of the visual language used and the aesthetic decisions taken to visualize two birds in the logo is what Peirce refers to as an immediate effect on the interpretation. If you see birds, the sign action has begun. If you see the two birds and recognize them as liver birds, then the semiotic effect of its representation on you has moved from immediate to dynamic. You have been visually mediated to move from a possibility to a proposition, from possible birds to probable liver birds. The semiotic representation has had the effect on the interpreter who, in their lived experience, have knowledge and experience of the concept of liver birds, can name them. The iconic visual communication building blocks of swirling grid marks composed into a certain pattern of these shapes suggest birds, then the shape of particular birds, liver birds. This triggering of more contextual meaning that enriches the understanding is now at an indexical level of representation. In Peircean terms, perception has moved from firstness to secondness and from romantic to distant levels of interpretation. It has mediated interpretation into a proposal to those who know. The interpretation is now this thing. Notice I stated this as those who know. Those who, in their lived experience, know of the liver birds of Liverpool can interpret the image at a deeper level of visually communicated meaning. Those who have never heard of liver birds can still interpret some meaning of two red birds from the same image. One set of interpreters will have a deeper understanding of what they see than the other set of interpreters. Those who know have been semiotically mediated to the liver bird interpretation. In the image that others only can interpret as birds, there are visually encoded iconic marks, shapes and colours that reinforce the concept of liver birds rather than parrots or eagles or ostriches. So before we move on to conclude this episode, let us quickly summarise what this means to creatives. One image, an interpreter, aesthetic decisions, encoded semiotic signs. Three possibilities for the semiotic sign action effect of the representation, two birds, of the concept, liver birds, on the interpretation. A. No perception of semiotic sign action. B. A perception of two red bird shapes. C. A perception of two liver birds. The effect on the interpretation is dependent on the representation and interpretation, upon the creator's ability and the target audience's lived experiences. Successful semiotic encoding is dependent on the how and what context. How to select the appropriate visual language and make appropriate aesthetic decisions in designing or illustrating. What will the target audience understand from what is represented? Semiosis helps the creator connect the how and what into successful visual communication. Let us put this into clearer examples. A. No perception of semiotic sign action. Nothing in the visual entity is perceived as meaning-bearing. It is just perceived at face value. The audience cannot interpret two bird shapes amongst the lines, colours and shapes in the image. Why is this? If the creator's visual language and aesthetic decisions are too stylized, any encoded semiotic sign action may not be perceived. If the representation is also too realistic, any connotational meaning could be lost by a simple denotational interpretation. This is a beautifully realistic drawing of cormorants. Liver birds are purely fictional birds, just like a phoenix, but are thought to be based on cormorants. Any encoded iconic representations to trigger familiarity of and resemblance to qualities that are in the lived experiences of target audience have not been perceived as something. B. A perception of two red bird shapes. The semiotic sign action is triggered. The audience has enough lived experience to interpret the iconic shapes as two red birds. The semiotic encoding in the creator's visual language and aesthetic decisions sufficiently visually communicate bird shapes. This means that the semiotic encoding has had an immediate interpretive effect on the interpreter and put the concept of birds in the minds of the audience. C. A perception of two liver birds. The interpretation of two red birds is a successful interpretation, but if the full concept to communicate is Liverpool or Scouse, the image still has more meaning bearing in the representation to interpret. While the semiotic sign action has been triggered, the audience has more contextual knowledge within their lived experience to interpret further meaning from the image. From the iconic two red bird shapes, the dynamic effect of ensuring the shapes put in the mind of the audience the concept of live birds is mediated by how hard the shapes suggest one type of bird over another type. Within semiotic encoding, the skill is to first understand what the audience may already know, what visual qualities can this knowledge suggest, and how can you, as a creative, effectively use these iconic building blocks. I said in an earlier episode that this is not rocket science. Applying semiosis is easier than you think once you align it to your existing creative practice. This is why Semiosis 101 is crucial. Pearce cannot be directly read as a creative how-to guide. Come back next week when we will explore how to dynamically mediate effective visual communication. I am Dave Wood, a design educator and researcher, a published design author, and I've worked commercially as both a freelance illustrator and graphic designer. The guy behind the theory, Charles Sanders Peirce, was a philosopher, a mathematician, and a theorist. But he was not a creative. Each week on this Scout Scott Semiosis 101 YouTube channel, I will post at least one free 10-minute explainer episode on an aspect of Peirce's pragmatic semiotic theory. Each free YouTube episode features a take-home piece of applicable semiotic theory, and they do interconnect to build up your understanding of semiosis. Each free Semiosis 101 YouTube 10-minute episode will use designer-centric terms instead of theoretical language. As well as the free YouTube episodes, I have 2 further Semiosis 101 semiotic resources you can subscribe to. Semiosis 101 producer roles are now available on Patreon. If you take out a paid Patreon Semiosis 101 patronage, you will get access to all the future season episodes months before they get published on YouTube. As a Patreon Semiosis 101 patron, you will automatically become a Semiosis 101 producer and get a name credit on all future YouTube episodes. Depending on which of the 4 producer tiers you choose, you will also get access to behind the scenes insights, cool Semiosis 101 Patreon merchandise, and other goodies for Semiosis 101 to continue making semiotic episodes. As a Patreon Semiosis 101 producer, you will be financially supporting the sustainable future of Semiosis 101 to keep explaining Peirce's semiotic theory. To become a Patreon Semiosis 101 producer, the link is in the description. I have a written semiotic resource available on the Semiosis 101 Substack. Here I have semiotic support materials for both free and paid Substack subscribers. There are full annotated reading lists, episode transcripts, 5-minute semiotic reads, plus other goodies and exclusive Semiosis 101 Substack merchandise. The Substack link is in the description. As a fellow creative and a published design author, I also have a link in the description to my main Scout Scott website. If you're interested in reading my semiotic Rosetta Stone academic writing, then you can visit my academia.edu link in the description. Any other books on Peircean semiotics or design I've mentioned in the episodes are also listed in the description. Check them out too. Thanks for watching. Check out the other Semiosis 101 episodes, like and share them with your friends. And hit the bell and subscribe buttons to be notified when next week's free Semiosis 101 episode is published. You can also follow Semiosis 101 on the socials for updates. It is at Semiosis 101 on Instagram and Threads. See you all again next week for more Semiosis 101 to help illustrators and designers to enhance your visual communication skills.